The first thing I noticed was the gate. A massive steel gate had been installed across the dirt road leading into my property. It wasn't there when I bought the land. It wasn't in my property documents. And nobody had asked my permission. I stood there staring at it, wondering how an HOA could possibly believe it had the right to block access to land that belonged to me. Then I saw the sign. HOA private access, no trespassing. I almost laughed. The road behind that gate led directly to the back section of my property. The HOA had apparently decided that because the road passed near their neighborhood, they could claim control over it. I called the HOA president, Karen. She arrived about 20 minutes later, wearing her usual red blazer and carrying a folder. I pointed at the gate. Who installed this? Karen didn't hesitate. The HOA. Why? She said the gate was necessary for neighborhood security. I asked her where the HOA got permission to install a structure on my land. She told me the HOA had been using that road for years. That doesn't answer my question. Karen became irritated. She said the road had always been considered community access. I told her that my property deed said otherwise. She simply smiled. Your deed isn't the only document that matters. That sentence bothered me. So I went home and pulled out every property record I had. The property boundaries were clear. The road was inside my parcel. The gate was inside my parcel. And the HOA didn't have an ownership interest listed anywhere. I called Karen again. I told her the gate needed to come down. She refused. Then she threatened to fine me if I removed it. That's when I knew this was bigger than a simple HOA disagreement. The next morning, I contacted the county and confirmed the property boundaries. Everything matched my records. The gate was on my land. So I hired a licensed contractor to remove the unauthorized structure. We didn't damage anything. We didn't enter anyone's home. We simply removed the gate that had been installed across my own property access. When the gate came down, Karen arrived almost immediately. She was furious. You can't do this. I pointed toward my property line. Yes, I can. She called the police. A few minutes later, a patrol officer arrived. Karen rushed toward him with a stack of papers. Officer, he destroyed HOA property. The officer looked at the fallen gate. Then he looked at me. Who owns this land? I handed him my property documents. Karen interrupted. The HOA has rights to this road. The officer asked her to show him the paperwork proving that. She started flipping through her folder. Nothing. The officer checked the county information on his computer. Then he walked over to the former gate location. He looked at the ground. And that's when everything changed. He noticed something underneath the old gatepost. A small metal utility box had been partially covered by dirt. He crouched down and inspected it. What is this? Karen suddenly became very quiet. I had never seen that box before. The officer carefully opened the cover. Inside were several cables and a small electronic device. It looked like some kind of access control equipment. The officer asked Karen whether the HOA had installed it. She said she didn't know. That answer didn't make sense. He inspected the wiring. One cable ran beneath the dirt road toward the HOA neighborhood. Another appeared to connect to a separate communications line. The officer called for additional assistance. Within minutes, another officer arrived. They began documenting everything. Karen kept insisting the equipment was simply part of the neighborhood security system. But the officer asked a simple question. If this is HOA security equipment, why is it installed on private property without the owner's permission? Karen had no answer. Then the officer noticed something else. There was a small camera mounted on a nearby pole. It wasn't facing the neighborhood entrance. It was pointed directly toward a road leading through my property. The officer asked who had access to camera. Karen said the HOA security committee did. I asked whether anyone had ever told me I was being monitored. Nobody answered. The officers photographed the equipment and told everyone not to disturb it. Later, the county confirmed that the HOA had installed several pieces of security infrastructure along the road without properly documenting the installations. The gate wasn't just blocking my property. It had apparently been used as part of an unauthorized access control system. And suddenly Karen's obsession with controlling that road made sense. She wasn't simply trying to keep me out. She wanted control who could enter and leave through my property. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that week. I attended. Karen was there too. She looked completely different from the confident woman who had confronted me at the gate. The board's attorney explained that the HOA needed to review how the equipment had been installed and who had authorized it. Then one homeowner asked the question everyone had been thinking. Why did the HOA install security equipment on land it doesn't own? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, the attorney admitted they had a serious documentation problem. Karen tried to explain that previous board members had approved the project, but that only created another problem. Because if previous board members had approved it, where were the records? No one could produce them. The investigation continued, and eventually, the HOA agreed to remove the remaining equipment from my property and restore the access road. The gate was gone. The cameras were gone. The hidden equipment was gone. And my property was finally mine again. But the biggest lesson wasn't about tearing down a gate. It was about what happened when someone finally looked underneath it. Karen thought the gate would give her control. Instead, it exposed everything the HOA had installed where it didn't belong. I didn't need to win an argument with Karen. I needed the property records. I needed the facts. And when the officer arrived, he didn't care who was yelling the loudest. He looked at the documents. Then he looked at the evidence. And once he saw what was hidden beneath that gate, the entire story changed. Because sometimes the most suspicious thing about an HOA gate isn't the gate itself. It's what someone doesn't want you to see underneath it.